Empire of Death, the newest episode of Doctor Who, and the last of this newest season, has just released. With this episode being a finale, there was so much excitement and expectations from the fans, but does this episode actually live up to that hype? Well, let's just get straight into talking about this episode. So, naturally, let's start at the introduction of this episode, because, for me, it was amazing. Obviously, we've all heard and seen the comparisons to Infinity War. I 100% get that, but it was different enough for me, and I just love the wiping out of everyone. I think it really sets up Sutekh to be this powerful villain that is going to be a struggle to beat. We see everybody the Doctor loves get wiped out, everybody Ruby loves get wiped out, and you really feel that impact straight away. I know people say this lessens the stakes for the episode, makes it less intense, but I went in this episode expecting Rusty Davies to have another one of those endings where it all wraps up nicely after a whole world or universe ending event, and so I really was not shocked. Seeing everyone in the world and universe die really did not come to a shock to me when knowing it's a Rusty Davies finale. Now, not only did this enhance Sutekh for me, but just the whole scene of seeing the universe go dark and cold and just get wiped out was insane. It was truly incredible, and despite whether you like the rest of the episode, it was such a great setup for what was to come. Now, I want to talk about Sutekh, because I definitely think for a certain group of fans, they are going to say he was mishandled in this, and that is a fair argument. He was barely in this episode, and he was mainly just used to get the answer to who Ruby's mum is, and to be honest, he wasn't that threatening overall across the episode. I did say he was in the opener, and that still stands, just throughout it didn't really maintain. I like the scene at the start where he's talking to the Doctor before the Doctor gets in the memory TARDIS. That scene is kind of what you'd expect there to be in this episode, and we get a callback to the line from Pyramids of Mars where he says from his perspective what he's doing is good. That was just nice to have. Seeing him in unit in 2024 with everything wiped out, it just had this eerie vibe to it, and that was really cool as well. Now, on top of Sutekh not being used much, I think the main bit people are not going to like with him is how he got defeated. Now, I actually personally love how he got defeated, but people just don't like that because he's a dog, he died basically being on a leash. I just find that quite funny. It's very Doctor Who. I love the callbacks to the church on Ruby Road where he's using the weightless glove as well as the rope, and I honestly really enjoyed that whole sequence with them defeating Sutekh. I know this ending might be disappointing to people because of how powerful he is, but the villain in this story could have been anyone, which is a criticism in itself, and knowing it could have been anything, I actually like the way he goes out. Granted, because of who it is a bit disappointing for certain people. Now, this episode, despite being 55 minutes long, felt very quick. And I think it felt this quick because we had one scene on a random planet once the universe was destroyed. That lasted like 5 minutes, yet it was in one location. And then you go to one other place which links to 73 yards, but we'll get more into that after. And in this place, it's again a very quick, like 2-minute scene where they find out the name of Ruby's mother, and then straight away we're into the scene where they defeat Sutekh. Those scenes individually are all good, but I feel like it just moves too quickly, almost, and we don't get loads of time to feel that impact, and it feels like Sutekh is defeated very easily because of how fast it happens. As much as I love the long introduction and the long ending where we see everything with Ruby, it honestly feels like you almost needed more time with the rest of the story first. Now, like I just said, 73 yards got mentioned in this episode, and I feel like it was a bit pointless. They kind of mentioned 73 yards because of the camera that filmed Ruby's mum in 2004 was being 66 meters away, which is 73 yards. And then it started linking back to that story and her meeting Roger Ap Gwilliam, but it really didn't link that well. I get the idea that they were going with, but that whole story was about him starting nuclear war, and yet they used that to explain how they could find her mother in 2046 and not 2024. I feel like it was a very loose connection, and I kind of don't like how easy that was to just find their mother, because the Doctor has a time machine, and for what it seems to be, it was as easy as googling their name in 2046. Why have they not done that already? As we learn, she's just a normal woman, so why have they not done that? I would understand if it's some god or otherworldly being that they won't find in this genetic database, but like, how have they not found that out yet? 73 Yards is my favorite episode in this series, so when it got a mention, I was excited to see more about it, but after the episode, I was like, they didn't even need to mention that. I thought it was going to be some link to who Ruby's mum is. Maybe it is just herself and all that sort of thing. no, it was just a throwaway line because of the 66 meters thing. And I think now, in retrospect, that was just used in The Legend of Ruby Sunday to throw everyone off and think 73 yards is important, which I don't really enjoy. I feel like we've already had loads of twists, and almost acting like you're going to give more answers to 73 yards and then not is probably really frustrating for those that didn't like it, because there are a large portion of people that didn't like 73 yards. Now, Miss Flood was in this episode, and again, she was as weird and funny and odd as always, and I really enjoy her character. I don't really know who she is yet, no one has a clue, but she is enjoyable in every scene, and I am excited to see what happens with her in Season 2. Now, I know a lot of people were annoyed that we didn't figure out who she is in this season. I didn't want to. Like, now that I've seen The Empire of Death, Legend of Ruby Sunday, I want to. But that's because that's the most we've seen of her character, and I'm now really intrigued, and I'm excited to see more of that. And I'm glad the answer of who she is left for Season 2 to keep people wanting to watch that season, and to be honest, I am excited to see that. I think what's keeping me interested the most is that this character, I can't determine if they're good or bad. Like, they seemed evil in The Legend of Ruby Sunday, but then they seemed really cheery in this episode when she realized that she lived because of the Doctor, and she seemed almost proud of the Doctor. And then we see her at the end of this episode break the fourth wall again, and she talks about the Doctor's demise in Season 2, but it doesn't seem like she's caused that, and so I'm just really interested to see who she is, and I definitely think they handled her appearance as well so far. Now, the resolution of this episode, again, I do quite like. Like I said, going into this episode, I expected Russell T Davies to have one of those endings again where everything is destroyed, there's no way back, and then bam, everything gets reset. And that did happen again, sadly. But I think it was one of the better explanations that we've had, personally. Although it's not very sci-fi, the death cancelling out death thing, I can deal with that, and I actually quite like it in this sense, because he is a god of death. He can bring death to anything, so why can't he bring death to death? And so I enjoyed that. And although taking him through the time vortex is a bit of an odd way of doing that, considering that was meant to be where he was taken the first time he was killed, so why would it work the second time? Whatever. I do like him scratching through the time vortex, and that's how it fixes. Just bleeding parts of him into each of these worlds to reset it. I don't know how that works necessarily, because surely he'd be in control of his own powers and so wouldn't give life back, but honestly, it's fine. It's one of the better explanations RTD's given for one of these finales, and so I'll take what I can get. I will say though, that scene with Sutekh hanging by the neck with the rope, flying out the TARDIS in the vortex, brilliant. It just looked so amazing, and Ncuti's monologue to him is just brilliant. Like, that was one of those defining moment scenes, and I do love that. Now, I want to talk about Ruby's mother, because she was an important part of this story, but I'm almost certainly in the middle on it. I don't know how I feel, because I actually like what they did in terms of giving a good message to people watching, and how they gave Ruby her happy ending. Normally we always end on a bad note, but this one just, it was so emotional, but happy emotional, and I like that. It was a very affecting ending to this story, and so I can't fault it for that. The approach he took with it, I think, does work on an emotional level, and I was fully convinced by the end of that episode, because of the Doctor saying how Ruby's affected his outlook on family and how she's finally found her real family, that he'll go out and find Susan, and that doesn't happen. Now, I'm hoping that happens in Season 2. I'm hoping that might even be the plot of Season 2, or at least something he's on the lookout for. But for me, that was a misstep. The rest of it, though, it worked. However, it really leaves a lot of questions unanswered. I just don't understand the choice of doing this when you had Ruby have snowfall around her, have a Christmas song follow her, have Ruby have the ability to, like, manifest things from thinking about them. Why have that if she's just a normal person? Like, that's fine. She can be just an average person, a normal person. But it makes zero sense why these things have been happening if Ruby's mother isn't this otherworldly being, or daughter, whatever you want to call her. Why can't we see Ruby's face in the footage? Like, sure, the footage could just be corrupt and you can't see it, but why does Sutekh care so much about Ruby's mother just because he can't see her on the footage? You know, it just, there's so many loose threads because of her being normal, that if she just wasn't a normal person, I feel like there would be a lot of issues of this episode just solved instantly, and I really wish it took that route. Then again, like I said, emotionally, it worked really well, and so I did enjoy those scenes, and that ending was just so nice to watch. Now, a bit like how Mrs. Flood talks when she breaks the fourth wall at the end of this episode, she talks about Ruby's story like it starts on Church on Ruby Road, ends here, like it's full circle, that story's closed, and they have actually done that quite well in here, in the fact that they brought back the Doctor's costume from that episode, they brought back the weight gloves, they then brought back the rope, having Ruby even find her real mother, and the episode felt very much like Long Lost Families in the end. end, which is the Davina McCall show that she was on in her first episode. And the way Kate was talking about her mother when they first found out who she was just really reminded me of Davina McCall on that. And I feel like, again, that links with my last point with the mother being a real person. I feel like it just allows this series to feel like its own thing and have this bookend. Now let's talk about Susan Foreman, because I feel like she should have been in this episode. Like, the doctor goes to find her after seeing how Ruby has found her mother, but that never happened. And with all the fake outs and stuff, I thought she had to appear. Like, it feels so weird that you're like teasing the return of this character for the whole season, and then she doesn't appear ever, and she's not even involved remotely. I really wish she was. And I feel like because of all these fake outs, she has to be in season 2. I feel like the fans are wanting that, and I feel like Russell T Davies knows that that would have happened after season 1. I'm still holding out hope, though, that the new companion at Christmas is Susan Foreman, and that our Christmas episode is the Doctor going to find Susan. And this is a nice family reunion episode. I feel like that could be quite fun. Probably a mile off, but one can hope. Now, I don't know if I came across overly positive or overly negative in this video, but I did truly enjoy this episode, and yet at the same time, I kind of didn't. It's a weird one. I was at the cinema watching this episode, and there was so much excitement going into the second part. It was very exciting at that time, and everyone was hyped to get into the episode, and yet when you got to the end, it felt like everybody was dead. Now, that could be because it was 1 a.m. That might be it, but it felt like people were just like annoyed with this episode, and I fully understand. I felt the exact same way. It's crazy to me that the episode wasn't bigger and more bombastic. Like, the villain, like I said, was barely in this. It was a very much more low-key, heartfelt story, and there wasn't as much going on. It was probably, out of all the finales in Doctor Who, at least the modern era, probably the most chill one. And that's a weird description for a finale, but it was very low-key, and yet it felt like it had the biggest stakes going into it with the villain, and that's a very odd feeling. I still enjoyed my experience with the episode, and I feel like on rewatch I will really like it still, and I definitely feel like it's not the worst finale in this show, and yet the feeling and vibe of that cinema at the end, it was sad. And I've seen already videos online and people online criticizing this episode heavily. Like, people don't like this. I've heard people say it's a controversial episode. I don't even think it is. I haven't seen much positivity around it, and I think that's a real shame for a first season. Now, overall, I have found this season really good, and I will probably make another video talking about that, but this season has been consistent for me. I don't think there's been a terrible episode. Like, Space Babies and Devil's Cord, to me, were the weakest of the season, but they don't reach some of the lows that other seasons have had for me, and this finale definitely is better than those, in my opinion. And the 2025 season could not come soon enough. With that said, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video, and make sure to drop some comments down below letting me know of your thoughts of the episode. I would love to see if there's anyone else that remotely likes this episode, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.